Yeah.
That's okay.
Wow. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Rabbi.
Does anybody, I hope everybody has power by now and running water, even if it's not drinkable. If anybody's still having problems, maybe put something in the chat box, and afterwards I'll see if I can help you with something. We certainly had another crazy week in Houston, huh?
Yep.
Okay, well, we should probably schedule sometime. I think we may have, in a couple of weeks, we might be able to schedule a time just to talk again. I did want to kind of talk about Purim since it's coming up Thursday night, and I have a whole program for that. You may have gotten the email with the outline, which I think is loaded up now on our website. So I'll share a screen. I'll show you Purim. Maybe this is actually a good time for us to be celebrating Purim because it'll, for those of us who are able to, add a little bit of humor into our lives, which we could probably all use, most of us can use anyway at this time. So let me see if I can find my handout. There it is. Okay. So Purim. Just a few kind of historical notes here at the beginning here. That's what under the title of history. So Robert Gordis, who was a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary, decades ago now, wrote a couple of books. He wrote one on the book of Job. He wrote one on the book of Esther and a couple of other books. And as is the sort of style of our movement, we want to put the biblical writings in their historical context, try and figure out who wrote them, when they were written, what was the motivation of the authors who were writing them. And so that's in his introduction to the book of Esther. Then he has a sort of a line-by-line commentary. So in his introduction to the book, he says that Ahasuerus is in fact Xerxes, who is a known emperor of the Persian Empire. That's what most people assume now, is Ahasuerus, at least supposedly, the character of Ahasuerus in the book of Esther is supposed to be representing Xerxes of Persia. There is one other reference to Ahasuerus, which is found in Ezra chapter 4, verse 6. And there it seems also pretty clear that Ezra is referring to Xerxes. Now, having said that, the book of Esther is written as a farce, in my opinion, the opinion of most scholars. It's written to be a parody, and obviously has some important meaning, as most parodies do. It's a political parody, so it's trying to teach us something about life, but it's written in a sort of a lighthearted kind of satirical way. And the character of Ahasuerus in the book of Esther, if you read it, is a pretty stupid person. He is not a very bright person, and it seems like a bumbling ruler. That's probably not the character of Xerxes, but that's not the purpose of the book of Esther was not to write a history, but to tell us something about life. Okay, so when was it written? So it would have to have been written after Xerxes, or at least during the time Xerxes was ruling. So that's 486 to 465. It would be, remember that Cyrus, a couple of emperors earlier, was the one who allowed the Israelites, the Jews, to return to their homeland and to start building the temple. But we know for a fact that most Jews did not return to Israel at that time. Most Jews, by then, they lived in Persia or that area, Mesopotamia region, for some 50 years, and they'd gotten kind of comfortable there. They knew the language, they knew the people, the neighborhood, the politics. They might have had businesses there. And it would not have been so easy for them to leave all that behind, and even family members behind, unless a whole family could move all at once, and go back to Israel. And meanwhile, back in Israel, since it was devastated by the Babylonian Empire, had never been really rebuilt, and there were marauders and bandits and so on, and the city walls had been destroyed, so there was no protection against those. And in essence, Israel was somewhat of the Wild West. So you had to really have a pioneering, hardy personality to want to go back to Israel, even though that's where we were supposed to be. Even though God promised us that land, you'd have to have a pretty strong personality to want to go back and be part of this pioneering experience to rebuild the country, when you could already live a life of reasonable existence in the Persian Empire, where people had been living now for, a generation and a half. So, but nevertheless, this story would have been written after the return from exile. So some Jews had gone back to Israel, but it's clearly before Alexander the Great conquers the world, which is in 330 before the Common Era, right? Because there's no evidence of any Greek influence in the book. So that kind of gives you the beginning and end dates of the possibility of when the book was written. According to the story in the book of Esther, the Jewish community in Persia, which remember is an enormous empire, is under attack by the second in command, the viceroy perhaps, whose name is Haman. But through chance, this is again according to the story in the book of Esther, through apparent chance, the king happens to be married to a Jewish woman named Esther, who reveals Haman's plot to the king, and thereby saves the Jewish people. So that's a kind of a serious story, right? Somebody wants to annihilate the Jewish people, and somehow we're miraculously saved. So it's a serious story, but the book itself is told in a very, like I said, amusing kind of way. And the holiday also is celebrated that way. It's comes around the same time of year as Mardi Gras, and some people have made some parallels to Mardi Gras. I have no idea, I forget exactly what Mardi Gras is supposed to represent, but people wear costumes in Mardi Gras, they dance and they sing and they carry on. And those sort of external behaviors are the same ones that we do on Purim. We wear costumes, we dance, we sing, we make fun, we eat fun foods. It's a pretty lighthearted experience. That's how it's celebrated. The word Purim itself means lots, as in like dice. When you cast lots, you throw dice. And the idea is it's a game of chance. And the name comes from the part of the story where Haman, the bad guy, was trying to decide when to destroy the Jewish people. So he cast lots to pick the month, and then he cast lots to pick the date, right? So that the gods or chance or whatever would determine the date of execution of the Jewish people. So the story is about the seeming randomness of the evil decree and the luck, so to speak, of redemption. Everyone comments on the fact that God is not mentioned anywhere in the book. There's no reference to God. There's a hint of a reference to God at one point where Mordecai, who is Esther's uncle, tells Esther, well, you're the queen, you have to rescue us. But if you don't think that you and your family will avoid the catastrophe that could happen to our people. You will be found out as a Jew anyway, and you'll be destroyed too. And maybe help will come from somewhere else. And that's kind of a vague reference to God, that somewhere else. In other words, God would come in and intervene. But other than that vague reference, there's no reference to God. Let me just stop sharing for a second. And I think I can see everybody here on the screen. So why don't we do a raise hands, and raise hand if you've read or heard the book of the book of Esther before, if you understand the story, because I can review it if you're not familiar. So raise your hands if you've heard the story before, kind of read
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Anybody else? Raising hands, thumbs up, applause. Okay. Well, it looks like most people maybe didn't. So let me just kind of review some of the funny parts of the story. Just I'm gonna do this from memory, so I might get a couple of details wrong. It's been a year since I read the book, but I should have read it before today, I guess, but I didn't. Okay, so it's a short book, by the way. It's an easy read and it's a fun read. So if you have a Bible at home, I encourage reading it. It's a good read. Okay, so the king of Persia, whoever he is, let's say Xerxes, takes over. And to celebrate his new kingship, he throws a party for the entire kingdom, right? And this kingdom stretches from, I think, even parts of Africa, maybe, but certainly into Israel and all the way west to Iran, which is where Persia is. So most of like the western part of Asia, and maybe a little bit into Europe, a little bit into Africa. It's a huge empire. And he throws a party for the entire empire. And how long is this party? 180 days. That is a party for half a year, 6 months. That's quite a party. And after he's done with that party, he decides he's not done partying yet. So he says, let's have another 1 week party just in the capital of my empire in Shushan, which they consider the capital. By the way, Shushan is what now is called Susa. It wasn't necessarily the capital of Persia, but it was one of the major cities. In any case, we're going to throw a party for just the capital for another whole week. I'm going to invite all my royal courtiers or whatever to come to this big banquet, and we're going to all party and feast for a whole week and drink. And the rules for drinking are no rules. Literally, that's what it says. So you get the idea right away that this is not a serious story. So naturally, it's mostly men, or maybe all men at this drinking party. It was that's the world at the time. And they're all drunk. And so the king, in his drunkenness, suggests that it would be really nice to have his beautiful wife, Vashti, that was his original wife, come out and parade her beauty to all these drunken men. Now, I will add this rabbinic commentary on this, just because I think there's something to it, actually. He says, and she should come out wearing her crown. And so the rabbis, in their typical fashion, ask, why did he have to say she should come out wearing her crown? If she's coming out as the queen in a public appearance, of course she's going to wear her crown. Why did he have to mention that? And so the rabbis, or at least one commentary, assumes that he meant that's all she should wear, her crown, right, to show her beauty to these drunken men. Here I have to say that although it's written in a very chauvinistic time, a male chauvinistic time, the author had some sympathy for women, clearly, because Vashti says, "Are you kidding me?" She didn't quite use that language, but she refuses to come out to show her beauty. She defies her husband, the king. And here's another example of where we learn that the king is not the sharpest knife in the tool drawer. He says, he's really angry. What do you mean she's refusing my order? How can she refuse to do what I commanded her to do? I'm the king of this big empire. But he gets so angry and he doesn't know what to do. So he has to ask his advisors, what should I do? What should I do? And his advisors come up with a plan that he should banish her. And he says, oh, that's a great idea. I'll banish her. So he banishes his wife. Well, sometime later, after he's recovered from his hangover and drunken stupor, he suddenly realizes that he's lonely, poor king. And he's despondent and depressed. And again, he doesn't know what to do. This is a recurring motif. So he asks his advisors, what should I do? And one of his advisors says, well, why don't we have a beauty contest, basically. We're going to round up all the young women from the entire empire, and we'll bring them in. And you, this is not a nice story. You get to spend one night with each of them. And then if you decide you like one, that woman will be your queen. We don't tell that part to kids when we're telling the story. We leave that part out, but it's in the book. Okay, so So they send out messages all over the empire trying to get all the young women to apply for the job of queen. And Mordecai, Esther's uncle, who is introduced as a Jew, says, you really should apply for this job. And she says, no, I'm really not cut out for this. And he says, no, you really should apply for this job. So she goes to the royal palace, and she, so there's eunuchs involved. Eunuchs are taking care of the royal harem. Naturally, you want eunuchs doing that. And the chief eunuch is named Hege, and she befriends Hege. And so he gives her some secrets about how to win over the king. So she, when it's her turn, she goes in. The king is totally smitten by her and decides she is the one, and they get married, and he is madly in love with her. After that, sometime later, there's a plot against the king. These two guys, two members of the royal court, plot to kill the king. Mordecai, Esther's uncle, who happens to also be someone in the court, we're not sure what position he held, hears about the plot against the king. He tells Esther. Esther tells the king that these two guys were going to kill him. The king does an investigation, finds that it's true, and he has the two people hanged. And then after that, for some reasons we don't understand, Ahasuerus, the king, appoints Haman to be his second in command. Haman has an ego the size of Texas. And he thinks that he should be king of the empire, and everybody should bow to him. So he, as second in command, makes a decree that everybody should bow to him. And Mordecai refuses to do that. We don't know why Mordecai refuses to do that. Some people say that we're not supposed to bow to anybody but God. But that's not true. We are allowed to follow common political protocols, and if bowing to a king is local protocols, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. So that's not the reason. It could be, one commentary suggested that Mordecai felt, hey, I just saved the king's life. How come I'm not taking Haman's job? I certainly am not going to bow to him. It could also be that he just knew that Haman was a bad guy and felt like it would be immoral to give honor to this person. In any case, he doesn't bow. Haman gets furious with him, finds out that he's Jewish, and then instead of doing something directly to Mordecai himself, that's when he gets his idea. He's going to kill all the Jews in the kingdom. And so he goes to Xerxes and he says, there's a people among you who he's one of the first anti-Semites. He says, there's a people among you who have their own customs. They're not like the rest of us. And I think they could be dangerous to us and end up supporting our enemies. Right? And so therefore we need to kill them all. And the king says, okay, kill them all. Oh, and Haman says, by the way, we'll take all their property and that'll enrich your treasury. So the king likes that idea too. And the king says, fine. So Mordecai hears about that. He tells Esther, and that's when he says what I mentioned before, you need to do something about this. You're the queen. Maybe that's how come you have risen to this position, so that you can do something to save our people. And then he says, and if you don't, maybe our help will come from somewhere else. So she says, this is kind of a weird thing. You're not allowed to see the king unless he calls for you. And if you go in and you're not announced, you're not called for, he has a royal scepter. And if he doesn't hold out his royal scepter, you are going to be executed, because it means he didn't want to see you and you bothered his watching TV. So is this okay? Is everybody interested in the story? It's okay so far?
So far, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Rabbi.
Okay. So she says, I don't know. It's risky for me to try and go in to see the king. But she says everybody should fast for 3 days, and then I'll go and see the king. So everybody fasts. She goes in to see the king. The king, of course, is delighted to see her. He loves his wife. And he says, what can I do for you? What can you do for you, my dear? I love you so much. I'll give you half my kingdom. And she says, well, you know what I really want is I want to have a banquet. She knows her husband, right? This is another sign that the story was written with a sympathetic ear towards women. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. She understands her husband, who had a banquet for 180 days when he first came into office and whatever. He likes that. He likes parties. So she says to him, how about if we have a party? And he says, oh, that's a fabulous idea, my dear. Well, who should we invite? And she says, just you and me and your second in command, Haman, just the three of us. We'll have a big party together. We'll drink. We'll have a good time. I embellished it a little bit, but that's pretty much what it says. So he says, great, fabulous. Let's do it. So Haman, of course, is thrilled to pieces. He gets to go have a private banquet with the king and the queen. I mean, what could be better for him? So he goes to the banquet, and they're all having a good time. And then the king turns to his queen and he says, my dear, this was such a brilliant idea. I love you so much. I'll do anything for you. I'll give you half the kingdom, whatever you want. And she says, you know what I really want? No, what do you really want? I really want another banquet tomorrow night, just you, me, and Haman. And he says, fabulous idea. I love parties. Let's do it again. So that's the deal. Haman goes home to his wife and says, this is so thrilling. I had a private party with the king and queen. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have another party with the queen and king. I am in heaven. And we're building a gallows, and we're going to hang Mordecai, and we're going to kill all the Jews. It's going to be a great time. That night, the king couldn't sleep. And they didn't have Sominex back then, or whatever Balsamra, or whatever the drugs are that help us go to sleep at night these days. They didn't have those drugs in those days. So what does the king do when he wants to fall asleep? I'm reading this into it, but makes sense to me. He reads the royal record books, the royal history. What could be more boring than that? So he asks one of his courtiers to come in and read him to sleep, read him a bedtime story of the records of the kingdom. And so as he's drifting off to sleep, they get to the part of the records where they say, oh, and there was a plot against the king. These two guys were discovered who tried to kill you. And we found out about it by this guy named Mordecai. And the king suddenly like wakes up and comes to, oh yeah, there was a plot against me. Yeah, Mordecai. Yeah, what, did we ever do anything for that guy? And they say, no, sir, we never gave him anything, right? We didn't give him the second in command position. You gave it to Haman. They didn't say that, but you never did anything for him. And he says, well, gee, we ought to do something for him. But once again, he doesn't know what to do. And, you know, it's one thing for a guy to be able to read the royal records, but that doesn't make him smart enough to be an advisor to the king. So basically, he doesn't want to ask that guy, his page, you know, what should he do? Because he's not smart enough. But the king doesn't know what to do. So and it's the middle of the night. What should he do? What should he do? And he's just trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, Haman is coming back to the palace to tell the king that he is going to hang Mordecai. And so they hear footsteps out of the hallway. And the king says, well, who's that outside in the hallway there? Oh, it's Haman, your chief advisor. Oh, perfect. Bring him in. I have a question for him. So Haman comes in, and the king turns to Haman and says, what should I do if I want to honor somebody? And Haman is thinking, wow, must be me, right? I had a big party with you last night. I have another party with you tomorrow night. You must be talking about me. I'm in seventh heaven. What would I want what would I want that you should do for me? Well, let me tell you, king, this is what you should do for somebody who wants to honor you. You should dress this person in your clothes. Does this tell you anything about Haman? He wants to be dressed like the king. He wants to wear the king's signet ring. He wants to be put on the king's horse. And he wants to be paraded through the streets of the capital by somebody who shouts before him, this is what the king does for somebody he wants to honor, right? I want to look like the king. I want to look like you. And again, the king is too stupid to figure out this guy is really trouble. He might be a threat to my throne, but he thinks, oh, great idea, let's do it. And then he says to Haman, you lead the horse and Mordecai is going to ride on it. And you can just imagine Mordecai's face when he heard that. It's not him that the king wants to honor, it's his despised enemy, Mordecai. That's the person he wants to dress in the king's clothes, ride the king's horse, and Haman is going to have to pull him through the streets of the city, saying this is what the king does when he wants to honor somebody. His mortal enemy, he's having to do this, and he is crestfallen. So the next day he does that, and then he goes to the party that evening. And so the party is just him, Haman, Esther, and Ahasuerus, the king. And they're all having a good time, and they're drinking, and Haman's beginning to forget the disaster of the morning when he had to parade Mordecai through the streets of Shushan. And then the king turns to Esther again. He says, "My dear, I love you so much. I'll give you half my kingdom. What would you like? Anything you want. Just name it, whatever it is you want." And she says to him, "I want you to save my life." And the king's like, "What? Why should your life be in danger?" And she says, "There's a man who wants to kill me, and he wants to kill all my people." And the king is, "No, that's impossible. Who would do such a horrible thing to my favorite queen?" And then she points at Haman and she says, "That man." And again, you can imagine Haman's face turning white when he realizes that the queen is Jewish. And so he is like terrified, mortified now. His life is in jeopardy, obviously. The king is furious. I mean, you can imagine him turning purple in the face. But again, he doesn't know what to do because he doesn't have an advisor. He's not going to ask Haman what to do. And there's no other advisors in the room, so he doesn't know what to do. So he storms off out to the balcony. And here's where, like, if you didn't get before that this was supposed to be a funny story, this is it. So he storms off to the balcony. Haman is totally mortified, fearing for his life. He starts to walk over to Esther, but trips and falls on top of her, on top of the sofa that she was reclining on. So now Haman is on top of Esther. And at that precise moment, the king comes back in from the balcony and sees Haman on top of his wife. And if he was apoplectic before, now he is like full on rage. "You're doing what in my living room?" And but again, he doesn't know what to do. So coincidentally, somebody from off stage out in the hallway there comes in and says, "Your Highness, Haman was building a gallows to hang Mordecai on." And the king says, "Hang Haman on it." And so the end of the story is they hang Haman and all his kids. And then there's this like peculiar part of the story where, according to the book, the king's decree cannot be reversed. So he's already issued a decree that the Jews are supposed to be killed on a particular day, but he can't undo that decree. The decree is out there. It's already been publicized. But what he can do is send out a new royal decree that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. Thank goodness for that. And so that's the decree he sends out. He sends out a decree that the Jews should be allowed to defend themselves. And what ensues at the end of the book, which we usually don't talk about, is a bloodbath. There's a big battle between people who want to kill Jews and Jews killing their enemies. And of course, we win. And so we celebrate. And then Mordecai, who ends up becoming the royal advisor, sends out a decree to all the Jews throughout the land that they should celebrate this day as a day of great victory for the Jews, and we should do it every year. And the Jewish people all over the world agree to celebrate this new holiday of Purim. So that's kind of the story. Let me go back to the handout now and just I did kind of that from memory. So you can check the details. Read the, one of the things we're supposed to do Thursday night and Friday is read the story. So like I said, it'll only take you maybe half an hour to read the story, and you can tell me what I got wrong. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the details of the story. So one of the meanings of the story is that it's a fight against evil. And to understand this, you need to see how the book of Esther was cleverly written to pick up on elements from earlier books in the Bible. And particularly right now, I want to focus on the story of Amalek, which we just read in the Torah portion, special Torah reading yesterday. The Saturday before Purim, we always read this portion from Deuteronomy 25, 17, and 19, where we learn about this attack on the Amalekites, which originally happened in the book of Exodus over here in chapter 17. So we left Egypt, we've crossed the Red Sea, we ran out of water and complained about that. We ran out of food and we complained about that. So now we've got food and water. And the next thing that happens is this marauding band of pirates, let's say, attack the Israelites. And it's a fierce battle. It's told that in Exodus that whenever Moses' hands were up, the Israelites are winning. When his hands got tired and they started to fall down, they'd start to lose. So he got two people to help him hold his hands up to win. But we end up fighting them off and they run away. So we haven't destroyed them, but we won the battle. And then in Deuteronomy, when Moses is repeating the history of the Exodus and the wandering in the desert to the Israelites, as Moses is about to die and he's recounting to the new generation of Israelites who were born in the wilderness about what happened and trying to urge them to keep God's commandments. And when he describes this attack of the Amalekites, he adds an interesting extra detail that's very important, that the Amalekites attacked the Israelites from the rear. That's where the women and the children and the sick people, the lame people, the elderly people, right? When you're marching through the wilderness, the strong people are up in front because they can walk faster, but also because they can be armed and protect people from the dangers that are in front of them. But that leaves the rear unprotected. And that's where the Amalekites attack. So they attack the defenseless people, sort of like ancient terrorists, right? Attacking civilians who can't defend themselves. And that's why God then tells Moses to tell the Israelites to remember what they did to you and never forget to wipe out the name of Amalek forever. You're supposed to completely obliterate them. And most modern interpretations and even earlier interpretations say this is really a reminder that there's always going to be evil in the world, evil people, and we have to confront evil people. We can't just let them terrorize people. We need to be proactive. So that's the original story. So he says, finish the job. I want you to finish wiping out the Amalekites. That's what Moses says. And then in the book of Samuel, when the Israelites finally get their first king, King Saul, chapter 15, the prophet Samuel tells King Saul, okay, now is the time to fulfill that commandment from Deuteronomy. God wants you to go to battle against the Amalekites and completely obliterate them. Now, when he says completely obliterate them, they mean completely, and this is not in any way how warfare should be conducted today, but apparently back then it was considered acceptable, right? We're talking about wiping out the men, the women, the children, every single person, and all of their animals, everything. Everything is supposed to get destroyed. That was what they were told to do. So King Saul goes to battle. He wipes out the Amalekites, but he spares the king whose name is Agag. Well, I'm going to get back to Esther in a minute. You'll see. He spares the king whose name is Agag, and he spares some of the best animals. Now, in ancient warfare, when you would get soldiers to support you in a battle and you don't have money to pay them, one of the ways you encourage people to fight for you is that if you win, they get to divide up the spoils. And so very likely the choice animals were spared as the reward to the soldiers for fighting. Um, in any case, the prophet Samuel, God tells the prophet Samuel, King Saul didn't follow your orders. He didn't kill everything. You need to go fix this. So he goes up to King Saul and he says, why didn't you do what God commanded? And Saul says, but I did. I killed everybody. He says, no, no, you didn't. I can hear the cows mooing. It literally says that. You can check it out. I can hear the cows mooing. How come I hear cows mooing? They should be dead by now. And so Saul says, oh, well, we saved the best animals to sacrifice to God. Kind of lying, really. That's not what he saved them for, but that's what he says. And Samuel says, look, God told you to destroy everything. God doesn't prefer sacrifices. God wants you to follow orders. So kill everything. And then King Saul says, and I also spared the king, Agag. I don't know why he did, but he did. And then there's this great line, which you should read this just because it's so much fun. So King Agag comes before the prophet Samuel, and he knows what's about to happen. And in the translation, it says, bitter death is at hand. He knows he's about to be killed. It's kind of like Shakespeare. And then Samuel, again, kind of like Shakespeare, says to him, just as your sword has made many women widows, your mother will now be bereaved of her son. And he takes out his sword and he strikes Agag and kills him. I should mention also here that King Saul, when he is introduced in the book of Samuel, in chapter 9, verse 1, he is introduced as a descendant of a man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, so I'm going to make this all relevant in a minute. In fact, right now. So in Esther, when Haman is introduced in the book of Esther in chapter 3, he is called Haman Ha'agagi, and that is Agagite, means Agagite. And as I mentioned before, the ite ending means son of. So Haman is a descendant of Agag. That would be King Agag, the Amalekites. So now we know that this is not an accident that Haman hates the Jews. Haman hates the Jews because of what they did to his ancestors. And Esther, in the book of Esther, Mordecai, when he is introduced in chapter 2 of Esther, he is introduced as a descendant of a man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. So now the book of Esther is telling you that Mordecai is not just a defender of the Jews now, but he is also a descendant of the original defender of the Jews against the Amalekites, the King Saul. So this is like an intergenerational battle of good against evil. That's basically what the book of Esther is saying. Haman represents the evil Amalekites. Mordecai represents the Israelites doing battle against them. And we're having a rematch of good against evil. And that is, by the way, when we, if you participate in the Megillah reading Thursday night, which will be online, of course, this year, people will make noise every time Haman's name is mentioned in the story. And the reason we make noise every time Haman's name is mentioned is to literally fulfill the commandment to wipe out the name of the Amalekites forever, right? So we're wiping out the name of the Amalekite, Haman, by making noise every time we read his name. But having said that, we do it in a fun way. And again, that's the nature of the holiday. It's kind of like the ancient, before my time, believe it or not, before talking movies, and you watch the old black and white movies, and the piano player was making music, right, and would play evil music when the evil guy came on, and happy music when the hero came on. And every time the bad guy came on the screen, everybody in the audience would say, boo, right? Because you always have to do that to the bad guy. And when the hero came in, you'd say, hooray, right? So people kind of got into the movies back then. So that's basically what we're doing when we're reading the story. We're making noise to just very much like people used to do in the early movie-going days, right? Making noise to drown out the villain of the story. You can also see it as a sort of a Star Wars Episode 3 kind of a thing, Return of the Jedi. Okay. Another way of reading this story, and this is from this book by Elijah Shokat, The Enemy Within, he suggests that this also can be seen as a metaphor, that evilness is not necessarily someone else who's evil that we need to fight, although that does happen. There are people who are really horrible people. But there is also a part of each one of us that tends to be a little too self-absorbed, not quite empathetic enough, compassionate enough about other people, maybe trying to get ahead by using unfair means. There's kind of a little piece of us that is the enemy within, right? And that part of this struggle of good against evil is an internal struggle to subdue our own baser impulses and try to redirect them towards positive things. Now, since we're a Jewish community living in the diaspora, this story resonates in this way very much with American Jews, I think, or it should. Remember that what I said at the beginning, after Cyrus allows the Jews to return to Israel and rebuild their homeland, most Jews don't return. They stay in Persia because it's comfortable. And in 1948, we returned to Israel before that, but in 1948, we were declared a political state, like a state among states, other states. We became a country. We have our independence. And since 1948, any Jew who wants to return to Israel can submit papers claiming identity and become a citizen of the state of Israel. And yet, there's almost the same number of Jews living in the United States as there are living in Israel. Not quite as many, but almost as many. So why is that? Why haven't we all returned home? And part of it is the same reason the Persian Jews didn't go home. We're comfortable here. We have friends, we have family, we have businesses. We know the language. It's a lot easier for us to live here than in Israel. And so many of us continue to live here. And that's a lot like Jews in the time of the book of Esther. So the question of the story is about finding and affirming our faith in a powerful diaspora community, which is very parallel to the story of Esther, right? Where there's a strong, powerful tendency to assimilate or even intermarry, like Esther and Ahasuerus did. There's a lot of discussion about why was she allowed to marry a non-Jewish person? But there's a tendency to assimilate and become just like every other American and forget about being Jewish. So the story of Esther is one of saying, no, we need to reaffirm our Jewish identity and maintain our faith and tradition and culture and practice and customs, even while being good citizens of the United States. Another thing that's like the world we live in is that God is absent or seemingly absent in the story, right? What is seen as random chance may be God working in the background, but that may also be like our world today. We don't see supernatural miracles in the book of Esther, nor do we see supernatural miracles in our lives today, but rather God works through our actions, right? Perhaps, which is what I believe, that it's up to us to do what God wants to have happen in this world. We need to do that. And that's also the book of Esther. Esther had to summon up the courage to see the king. She had to figure out how to convince the king, to reverse this decree and to reject his senior advisor. No small matter, but she figured out how to do it. Although it's not highlighted enough, it's not really her beauty. Her beauty is what attracted the king, but it's her brilliant mind, right, that saves the Jewish people. It's her wisdom that saves the Jewish people. And I think maybe some people don't give her enough credit for that. It's also a little bit like the story of Joseph, right? There's a court Jew, right, who rises to a position of power in Egypt in this case of Joseph. And he's able to save the Jewish people by storing up food for the years of famine so that Joseph's family, Jacob and his brothers, come to Egypt for food, and he thereby saves the Jewish people. And so Esther also rose to a position of power in a powerful foreign country, and was able to save the Jews. So there's a parallel there, and there's been a study of that where the writer of the book of Esther actually knew that and incorporated key plot elements and even words from the story of Joseph in the book of Esther, kind of knowingly making a parallel of the two stories. And the last thing, and this is perhaps the most important thing, and then we'll talk about what to do on the holiday. There's a statement in the Talmud, which is really important. So the rabbis, I'm going to do this without the share screen. So the rabbis tell this story that when the Jews were standing at Mount Sinai getting the 10 Commandments, there was thunder and lightning, and the mountain was shaking and smoke. And I mean, it was a terrifying experience. And even in the book of Exodus, as it records the events, it says that the Israelites turned to Moses and said, "This is too terrifying for us. If we do any more of this, we'll die of fright. You go up the mountain and talk to God and come back and tell us what he says. We can't handle any more of this." Right? And so there's this idea that they were terrified at this moment of getting the 10 Commandments when God asks him, will you follow these rules? Will you join me in this contract we're entering into? And so the rabbis pick up on this, and they, at a particular, again, a funny wording in the text, where it says that the people of Israel were standing at the bottom of the mountain. And in Hebrew, the word is tachtit har. Tachtit means at the bottom, and har means mountain. So they're standing at the bottom of the mountain. But tachtit can also mean under the mountain. And so the rabbis, in a fanciful interpretation, say, it's as if God lifted the mountain up and held it over their heads. So they were literally standing under the mountain. And God said to them, do you accept this relationship you're entering into now willingly? Or, I mean, would you accept this relationship? And if not, I'm going to drop this mountain on your heads, right? And so they were so terrified. What choice did they have but to say, of course, we accept this deal. You don't have to believe that the mountain was actually suspended over their heads if you believe what's actually written there, which is that the mountain was shaking and there was fire and brimstone and smoke and everything else. People were plenty terrified. It was as if the mountain was being held over their heads. So the rabbis make an interesting point. If you and I enter into a contract and I threaten you with a gun and say, sign here or I'll shoot you, and you sign, you could later come to court and say, yes, Your Honor, I did sign that, but he put a gun to my head and that's not fair. I didn't sign this willingly. And the contract is then voidable. You can void the contract. And so the rabbis make the same claim. Well, look, if we were under duress when we entered into this arrangement, we could get out of it. We just say this wasn't fair. So that is the statement that's made in the Talmud. But the Talmud then follows it up with the following statement. Yeah, maybe we were terrified then and were under duress, but in the story of Esther, where God is not even mentioned, God's certainly not threatening us. And Mordecai at the end of the story says to the Jewish people all over the world, we need to celebrate this new holiday to celebrate our victory. Everybody all over the world agrees. And there, they don't agree under duress. They agree willingly. They do it because, yeah, it's the right thing to do. Yeah, we should celebrate this great victory. And the rabbis would add, if they accepted this new holiday of Purim, wasn't in the Bible before, wasn't part of our holiday cycle before, a new holiday, of course, we're accepting everything that came beforehand. And we're accepting all of that willingly, right? And once again, that has a parallel for today, because today, again, we're not under duress to remain Jewish. For many centuries, Jews were the outcasts in society. We were living in ghettos. We were segregated. People saw us as different, didn't want to intermingle with us. And in the country we live in today, thankfully, for the most part, we're accepted as citizens, and many people, even like us and enjoy our consider us as fellow citizens. There's no prejudice. Just 50 years ago there was in the United States, but today there is not so much. And so we're not under any duress to remain Jewish. But the holiday of Purim comes to tell us, yeah, but we have a very rich heritage and a meaningful that provides us with a meaningful connection to God, our Creator, and a meaningful relationship with each other in a community. And we should, like the people in Esther, like the Jews of Esther's time, willingly accept this new this covenant and relationship and continue it for generations to come. So again, it's an important statement in the Talmud that I think resonates for people today. So this is just a few more things. This is the last holiday of the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar begins with the month of Nisan, which is the holiday of Passover. So that begins with our freedom. And it ends with Purim, sort of another holiday of freedom, right? And it begins with the Exodus with extraordinary miracles, and it ends with a diaspora holiday about redemption through our own actions and without obvious miracles. I kind of made this sort of list of holidays and sort of analogized it to a marriage or national identity. So Passover is like betrothal, right? That's when we sort of get engaged to God. And that's why we read the book, The Song of Songs, which is a book of love poetry on Passover. Sukkot represents wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And that's sort of like the engagement period in a marriage, right? Before you get married. And then you come to Shavuot, which is when we're at Mount Sinai and we get the 10 Commandments. And that's like the wedding ceremony. In a Jewish wedding, you have a ketubah, a written wedding contract, and the 10 Commandments that we got at Mount Sinai represents the ketubah, the contract we have with God. If so, then Purim is like the 25th anniversary renewal of vows. I kind of made this up myself. From a national perspective, if you look at it as a national identity perspective, Passover represents our Declaration of Independence. That's when we became an independent people. Sukkot represents the fight, perhaps, or the sorting out of what it means to be independent while we're wandering in the desert. And then we have our constitutional convention at Shavuot when we get the 10 Commandments. And then Purim is sort of ratification of the Constitution, right? We ratify the Constitution after the fact. On the holiday, we don't recite the Psalms of Praise called Hallel, which we do on Hanukkah and the other festivals. Different reasons are given for that. Some people say reading the book of Esther takes the place of it, or maybe it's not a complete redemption because we're still under Persian rule at the end of the story, or that it takes place outside the land of Israel. But in any case, we don't recite Hallel during the services on Purim. Also, there's no Kiddush, right? We normally have a Kiddush for the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Over a glass of wine, we say the day is holy. We don't have a Kiddush for Hanukkah, and we don't have Kiddush for Purim. But because Purim became kind of a holiday of silliness and fun, silly kind of goofy things, a funny version of Kiddush was written, which is just kind of a stream of consciousness, stringing together of Hebrew phrases. It's really hilarious, but you have to know Hebrew to understand it. You can probably Google Purim Kiddush and get it, and you'll probably get a version of it that explains what the snippets are taken from. There's no prohibition against working. You can still work on the holiday of Purim. So there's no sense of sacred time like the pilgrimage festivals. So what do you do on Purim? There's 4 things you're supposed to do on the holiday of Purim. The first is to read the book. We call it the Megillah, which means scroll, because it was one of the last books, other than the Torah scrolls, that was still read as a scroll. The other books of the prophets that we read in liturgy can be read from a book, like a bound book. But the scroll of Esther, we still read from a scroll when we're doing it ritually. So it's still called a Megillah. You're supposed to read it in the evening, which we're going to do Thursday night. And again, Friday morning, which if you want to watch the Zoom service or the live stream service that the chapel does Friday morning, it's like at 7 or something, maybe a quarter to 6 or a quarter to 7. You can hear the Megillah reading again in the morning. By the way, we're going to have a special drive-by Purim on Friday afternoon around, Jennifer can hop in here and tell us, I think it's at 4 o'clock. We're going to, you can come and drive through. We're going to have some things in the parking lot at Beth Yeshurun to kind of celebrate. Normally, this is a big deal at Beth Yeshurun. People come in the Thursday night, people wearing costumes. We have hamantaschen, which are the special cookies that we eat. Kids get to celebrate and we do fun things. We have a Purim carnival on a Sunday where there's different rides and things for the kids to do. None of that we can do this year. So instead, we're going to have a drive-by Purim experience on Friday afternoon. And we will have some kids reading from the Megillah on Thursday night. Okay, and every time Haman's name is mentioned, you make noise. The last 3 things you do, mashloach manot, which is sending gifts to friends. So usually hamantaschen, which are these special cookies, which are shaped and triangle shaped. So what you do is if you have a a round cookie cutter, you take dough and you cut out round things, and then you fold them up into triangles. And in the center, you put some kind of fruit filling, which can be any kind of jelly or preserves, or chocolate chips if you want to make chocolate ones. It's just a tradition to eat these kind of cookies on Purim, but we also eat other kinds of sweet things, or you can send fruits or nuts or other kinds of things to friends. You're supposed to give at least 2 different, we're a religion of rules, so we had to specify, so at least 2 kinds of food to at least 2 people. In a normal year, Diane and I make up bags. We go to Costco and buy huge quantities of like cracker packages and cookie packages and candies and stuff. And then we make a little plastic baggies of a mixture of things and hand out over 100 of them to the people who come to services. That's what we do. But I don't know how we're going to work out Mishloach Manot this year, but next year, God willing, it'll be easy. And then Matanot LeEvyonim is gifts to poor people, because we want poor people to be able to celebrate also. You can make a donation to the food bank. I think particularly this year, after what our disaster last week, the food bank needs food. I think giving food to the food bank at this time would be great, or giving to Meals on Wheels, either through Interfaith Ministries, which is the largest Meals on Wheels program in the city, or the Jewish Community Center has a kosher Meals on Wheels that delivers to Jewish folks who are kosher. So you can donate to them, or you can make a donation to the Jewish Family Service, which also takes care of people who need help. So gifts to poor is Matanot LeEvyonim. And finally, to have a seudah, a festive meal. This reminds us of the big festive meal that the king had when he first became king, as well as the 2 festive meals that Esther arranged. And it's a way for us to celebrate. And so typically there is some drinking at these meals. But I will say, as the last word on this subject is, some people get drunk on Purim because they say that there's a mitzvah to get so drunk you don't know the difference between Haman, the bad guy, and Mordechai, the good guy, and Esther, the good woman. But the actual Jewish authorities say, when you get to the law codes, they all say, do not get drunk, because you don't know, you're not in control of yourself, and you make a real fool out of yourself. So have a little something to drink, so you're kind of in a festive mood, but don't get drunk. And of course, if you're an alcoholic or members of Alcoholics Anonymous and you don't want to drink, you can do something else that will help you feel in a good mood, maybe eating more hamantaschen. Okay, so those are the requirements for the holiday of Purim, these 4 holidays and for observances, and that's it for me today. I hope you will enjoy Purim Thursday night. Kind of try and log in, watch our fun ceremony. Next year, it'll be a lot more fun when we're in person and we can celebrate properly together. But now we're doing the best we can. So join us Thursday night, and then Friday afternoon, if you can do the drive-by to see the Purim Festival. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you all stay warm, safe, healthy, and we'll look forward to better times for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Purim. Happy
Okay.
Purim.
Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Boker Tov.
Okay,
Boker
Tov.
Boker Tov.
Are people okay to go straight through? Do you need to take a really quick break?
Yeah, can we take a bio break?
Sure. So why don't we start in 5 minutes at like 10:07, okay?
It's almost 10:01.
Oh, it's 10:02. So anyway, come back.
No,
in
no, no,
five-
it's okay. I'm sorry.
Come back in 5 minutes. Hi, Linda. We're taking a really quick bathroom break because Steve ran over a little bit. So people need a real quick break.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So for the people that are here, how is everybody? Did people manage? What a crazy week.
Yes, it was crazy. How are you guys?
Well, we were really lucky, we had we did lose power. But we lost power for about 24 hours and then we got it back for about 6 hours or 5 or 6 hours. So we were able to recharge everything and our refrigerator went back on for a while and we were able to warm up the house a little bit. And then we lost it for another 24 hours and then the power came back on for good. So
Yeah.
It wasn't so bad. I mean, I got to wear a lot of winter clothes.
That's wonderful.
I used to live in Syracuse. I went to college in Syracuse, New York. And the weather that we had was nothing compared to Syracuse. We would have snow like every day. And the snow banks were like over my head, literally over my head. And they never closed for anything. And they never lost power. And, I guess when you live in a cold climate, you're ready for it.
Right.
Yes.
So it was funny how everything not funny. It was sad how everything fell apart, for weather
Yeah.
that really wasn't such a big deal. So
It was really cold.
it was really cold, but if we had had our power and our water, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. We would have stayed home and had hot chocolate and watched Netflix, right?
That's what I did. Eat and bake,
Is that what
bake,
we
bake.
do?
Gain
I
pounds.
slept in so many layers of clothes. I had a wool cap on, all this
Me
to bed.
too. Yes, we looked pretty ridiculous. We were waddling. We had so many.
And we had like every blanket in the house on the bed.
We have our house, the coldest that our house got was about 55 degrees. So it was not so bad.
Oh.
That's
wow.
how cold it got, 55. Our bedroom was maybe 50, but the rest of the house was 55. And we're just not used to cold weather at all. I mean, I have a friend who it went below 40 in her house. So she made a tent in the middle of her living room, and she basically stayed in her little blanket tent. because, you know, your body then ends up heating up the little tent.
That was smart.
Yeah, I thought that was really smart. All right, I think we'll wait one more minute. So I think the absolutely worst part was for people who didn't have a gas stove. You know, a lot of us in Houston have gas stoves. But if you didn't have a gas stove, it must have been miserable because you couldn't heat up water. You know, it was really comforting, speaking of comforting, to have a cup of tea, to be able to have hot beverages.
Yes. That's what I've got right now is hot tea.
I had like 4 cups of coffee already today, so this is herbal, but okay. So my computer's on Ethernet. So every time the attachment moves a tiny little bit, it makes a noise. So forgive me for that. Okay, so whoops, somebody's in the waiting room. Okay, let's just review by starting on page 40. Well, actually, let's do the Alephet song because it really has been a while. It's been 2 weeks, not just 1 week. So let's go to the back of the book and we'll sing the Alephet song. Aleph, Bet, Fet.
Aleph, Bet, Bet,
Gimel, Dalet, Hey.
Gimel, Hey.
Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet.
Vav, Zayin, Tet,
Yud, Kaf, Chaf.
Yud, Tav, Tav,
Lamed, Mem, Nun.
Lamed, Mem, Nun,
Samech, Ayin, Pei, Fei.
Samech, Ayin, Pei, Pei,
Tzadi, Kuf, Resh.
Tzadik, Kuf, Resh,
Shin, Sin, Tav.
Shin, Sin, Tav.
Okay. I have a really, really difficult suggestion. What if we tried reading our Aleph Bet chart backwards? What if we tried doing that? We can't sing it backwards. No singing backwards. That would be like too stressful. But it would be good for our brain to try to read it backwards. And since there are 2 tavs, we're going to say 2 tavs. We're going to say every one that appears there. Okay, so let's just try. Tav,
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 Sin, Shin. I'm going backwards. Resh,
Resh,
Sadi, Sofit,
Sadi, Sofit,
Sadi,
Tzadik,
Fe, Sofit,
Pei, Sofit,
Hey,
Hey,
In,
Ayin,
Samech, Nun, Sofit, Nun, Mem, Sofit, Mem, Lamed, Sofit, Kaf, Kaf, Yud,
Yud,
Et,
Bet,
Et,
Et,
Zayin,
Zayin,
Vav,
Vav,
Hey,
Hey,
Dalet,
Dalet,
Gimel,
Gimel,
Vet,
Bet,
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 Aleph.
Aleph.
I have a feeling that made everybody's brain hurt. But I would recommend you try doing that. If you can go backwards, right? And you can read this list backwards and you can read rows and columns like horizontally and vertically. If you could practice doing it that way, then your letter recognition by the end of the week, if you try doing that every day, your letter recognition would be like 100%. So, okay. So I recommend you trying that little exercise, okay? Let's go to the next page, 96. And we're just going to look at the name column and the symbol column. I'm going to say the name of the vowel, and you will say the sound of the vowel. But I'd really, if you possibly can, would like you to look at the symbol. Actually, you know what I'd like you to do? Take a moment with a pen or a pencil and write the pronunciation next to each of the vowel symbols, because it's easier to use if it's right next to the symbol. So write next to the kamatz, write next to patach, write next to the shva, not but not next to the shva, etc. I'll just wait a minute while you do that. I would write this sounds in. Okay, are people almost done? Yeah? All right, let's give it a try. I'm going to say the name of the vowel and you say the sound of the vowel, okay? And try to look at the symbol. Kamatz,
Ah,
patach,
ah,
shva.
eh,
Right, if it's not silent, it's eh. Chataf, patach,
ah,
chirik,
i,
cholam,
oh,
cholam chaser,
oh, oh,
chataf, kamatz.
oh,
Oh,
Okay. And look at chataf kamatz, right? It looks just like a kamatz with a shva in front of it, right? But it's pronounced o. Segol,
eh,
like in bed, chataf segol.
eh,
uh,
Chataf segol looks like a shva in front of a segol, right? It's 5 dots, and it's just like a regular segol. Say Ray.
eh,
A,
Good. It's you can either say a or you can say eh. Either is acceptable. Shuru.
ooh,
U,
Good. Who boots.
ooh,
Ooh, good. Let's do it from the bottom going backwards. Who boots. Shuruk.
rook,
Tere.
A,
Kataf segol.
i, ah, the go,
Segol.
eh,
Kataf kamatz.
oh,
Kolam chaser.
oh,
O,
oh,
Kolam.
oh, oh,
Pirik.
i,
E,
Kataf patach.
ah,
A,
Shiva.
eh,
Good. Patach.
patach,
Kamat.
ah,
Okay, now I'm going to do them out of order. Let's hear how you do. Kamatz.
ah,
Kubutz. Good. Good. Va. Good. Sere.
A.
A. Okay. Chirik.
Here.
Somebody said it.
E.
Good. Segol. Good. Cholam chaser. Good. Patach.
Ah.
Good. Hataf patach. Shuruk. Hataf segol.
A.
Good. I think we've done all of them. I'm gonna stop even if we haven't. How's that? Okay, that was a really good review. More than a review, right? Because we haven't done all of those vowels yet. Okay, let's do a little bit of, let's quickly look at page 49. And in 49, we did l'chaim, which means to life, right? When you say l'chaim, to life. And we started using the letter mem sophie, or the final mem, the mem that comes at the end of a word. Okay. And we're going to start, it looks like a square, right? A samech, which is like an S sound, and a mem look very similar, but a samech is rounder and a mem is more square. Okay. Page 50, number 1. I'm going to read the line twice and then you'll read it with me. Halam, Achim, Alim, Miriam, Badim, Taram. Halam, Achim, Alim, Miriam, Badim, Taram. Now please read it with me. Halam,
Alam.
Achim,
Achim.
Alim, Miriam, Badim, Taram.
Taram.
Good. Line 2. I'll read it twice and then you can kind of echo me the third time. Iyim, Shanayim, Batim, Adam, Dakim, Mitzrayim. Iyim, Shanayim, Batim, Adam, Dakim, Mitzrayim. Okay, this time you can echo me. Iyim,
Yim.
Shanayim,
Shnaim.
Batim,
Batim.
Adam,
Adam.
Dakim,
Takim.
Mitzrayim.
Mitzrayim.
Good. Line 3. Chacham, Raham, Yamim, Rabim, Chayim, Damam. Chacham, Ra'am, Yamim, Rabim, Chayim, Damam. This time echo me. Chacham, Ra'am, Yamim,
Jadim.
Rabim,
Rabim.
Chayim,
Hayim.
Damam.
Hamam.
4. Banim, Mayim, Adam, Shetayim, Milim, Asham. Banim, Mayim, Adam, Shetayim, Milim, Asham, Banim,
Anim.
Mayim,
Mayim.
Adam,
Adam. Dam.
Hayim,
Kam.
Milim,
Milim.
Sham.
Asham.
Okay, let's see. Before we do the more complicated words, let's look at the vocabulary. Did we already do the vocabulary, find the vocabulary for this page? I don't think we did.
Which page are you on?
I'm on 50.
You did that one, I think.
Did we already do the vocabulary at the bottom of the page?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went all the way to 53.
Okay, all right. So we had enough of a reading review then. Let's jump to 53. Okay, so here's the O vowel, which we've already looked at. So O with a vav and O without the vav. I know we did look at that a bit. And of course, the vocabulary word was Torah. And we said Torah can be either the scrolls with the 5 books of Moses, but it also can refer to Jewish learning and the Jewish way of life, not just the books, not just the 5 books of Moses written on parchment. Okay. Let's go to page 54. And we're going to start on line 4. And this is what I'd like to do before we actually read these words. I'd like to just read the vowel sounds. So I'm just going to show you how to do that on line 4. A, O, E, O, E, O, A, O, A, O. How are they trying to trick us on line 4 with the vowels? What do they want us to mix up? All of the shins, right? The letter shin has a dot, right? Letter shin has a dot. And they are wondering whether or not we will confuse in the word lashon or in the word sha'ot, whether we're going to start confusing that dot with the O vowel. And it will get more complicated after this. So it wouldn't be hard to mix those up. Okay, anyway, I'm going to read the vowels one more time on line 4, and then I'd like you to try to do it without me. A, O, E, O, E, O, A, O, A, O. Can you do it for me now?
A, O,
O,
E, O,
E, O,
A, O,
E,
A,
O,
O,
A, O,
O.
A, O.
O, O.
Okay, it doesn't sound like that was too difficult, huh?
Mhm.
Was it difficult?
No, once you say it.
Line 5. I just want to point out on line 5, the third word, the first letter is a tsadi. What's the vowel under the tsadi? Does anybody remember?
E,
E, E, E, right. So if the dot is above a word, it's O, and if it's below, it's E. Okay, I'm once again on line 5. I'm going to read the vowels and then you read them. A, O, O, A. E, O, O, A. E, O, E, O. I'll do it one more time. A, O, O, A, E, O, O, A, E, O, E, O. Okay, you do it now.
A,
O, O, A,
E,
E, O,
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 A,
A,
E,
E, O,
E, O.
E, O.
So if it's two dots
Yes.
under the letter, that's shva. And we said we would pronounce that like eh.
Mhm.
One dot under the consonant, it's called chirik. And we're going to pronounce it E. Okay. Line 6, same deal. I'll say the vowels and then you say them. Oh, wow. This is complicated. Here we go. E, O, O. A, A, O. A, A, O. A, O, O, A. Again. E, O, O. A, A, O. A, A, O. A, O, O, A. Can I hear you do that?
A, O, O,
A,
A, A, O,
A,
A, A, O, A,
O,
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 A.
A.
Okay, can anyone, that was good. That was good. Can anybody read the first word on line 6 for me?
Shalom, Shalom, Shalomo, Shalomo, Shlomo.
Shlomo,
Yes, Shlomo. King
Melech
Shlomo.
Shlomo, right?
Shlomo. Yeah,
Right, Solomon, Shlomo,
Solomon,
Solomon, Shlomo.
Shlomo.
Okay, very good. All right. Line 7, the same deal, line 7. A, O, E, A, O, O, A. Again, A, O, E, A, O, O, A. Okay, let's hear you do it.
A,
A, O, E,
A,
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 O,
A,
O,
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 A,
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 A.
A. No, A, O, A.
O.
It's the last word on line 7 is just A.
A, A.
Hashana, right? So let's see. Okay. Oh, I know we talked about a little bit of this last week, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to keep going. All right. Let's go to, let's see. Okay, on the top of 55, usually O, or in other words, a vav with a dot over it, has the sound O, like ro or so. Sometimes, yes, this really confused me when I was learning Hebrew. Sometimes the vav with the dot over it has the sound vo, like avo or sivo. If there is a vowel under the letter before O, then O has the sound vo, right? If there's a vowel under the letter before the vav with the dot on top, then the vav with the dot on top has the sound vo. Okay? Read each line below, then circle all the words in which the vav with the dot on top has the sound O. So we said the criteria is it's vo if the consonant before it has a vowel. So I'm just going to do the very first one on line 1 for you. So the first word on line 1 is mem chirik tzadi shva holam tav. Under the tzadi, there is a vowel, the shva vowel. So since the tzadi has a vowel under it, we know that the next letter is not O, but vo, right? Because the tzadi has a vowel. So it's meets vote, meets vote. And I can definitely tell you, and they put it first, that this is the #1 mistake that people who are first learning make. I made this mistake and a teacher corrected me. I still remember being corrected for this one. But anyway, please look and see if you what else you can find. Which other ones sound like vo? Which other ones sound like vo?
Dorot. Brachot? No.
We'll go over the answers in just a second. Just go through the 1, 2, 3, 4. Just skim through and find the O's that are actually vo because the consonant before the O has a vowel.
Avoni.
Okay, on line 1, how many words have the vo sound? How many words have the vo sound?
3.
2.
2. 2. Oh. 2. I'm going to read line 1 for you. Meets, vote, rotsa, avoni, meet. Oh, you're right. It's 3. Whoever said 3 was correct. Meets, va, ratson. I was wrong and you were right. There are 3. Okay. So third word, avoni. Why is it avoni? Why do we say vo in the word avoni?
Because there's a vowel before it.
Because there is a vowel under the ayin. Since there's a vowel under the ayin, it's avoni. What about in the next word? It meets va. Why is it meets va? What makes that? Actually, that's not an O, so I take it back. It's only 2 that have vo. But why is it meets va and not why? Well, you know what? That one doesn't really count. That doesn't count. We're not going to worry about that one. It's 2. Meets vote and avoni. We're just looking for vo, right? We're just looking for vo. Sorry for my confusion. Line 2, which ones have the vo sound? We're not counting the ones that have va, okay? Just vo. Which ones have the vo sound? How many? Well, somebody said one of them. I think.
Avonita. Avonitai.
Right. Avonotai. Good. Avonotai. You're very close to the pronunciation. Avonotai. And then there's another vo. What's the other vo? Actually, I see 2 more vos.
Meets vote.
Then it's bow.
Batiot.
Right. Be meets vote. Right. The tzadi has a vowel. So it's vote. And then at the end of the line, the end of line 2. Be mitzvotav. Be mitzvotav. Right? And that's because, once again, the tzadi has a vowel under it. So it's vo. Okay, line 3. Take pride where the vos are in line 3.
Avon.
Correct, avon.
Matzot.
Not matzot, not matzot. That's not a vo. We're looking for the vo sounds. Where else do we have the vo sounds?
Bar mitzvot votai.
Correct. That was good reading. Be mitzvotai.
I'm sounding them out.
That was good. That was good. That's exactly correct. That means with my commandments. Okay, line 4. Where do we have the vo sounds?
Mitzvotai.
Mitzvotai.
Right. So meets vo tie. And I see one other word that has vo.
Avona.
Right. Avona. Avona. Okay. Oh my, here's another rule. When the vowel O, in other words, kolam, when the vowel O is followed by the letter Yod at the end of a word, oy. Say oy, as in boy. So now say the Hebrew phrase for oh my. Oy vavoy. Oy vavoy. Can you say oy vavoy?
Oi vavoy.
Good. And you know,
Obey.
oy vavoy. Oy vavoy. That's kind of like it. When I was a kid, my grandparents spoke some Yiddish and I picked up a lot of Yiddish expressions, but I have a feeling that you know, other cultures have things that are very similar because my grandparents would say things like "Oi gewalt," or I'm to think of another one, and or sometimes we would just say "Oi oi oi, oi oi oi." So when I was a little girl in the playground, I would say "Oi oi oi." So, but in Israel they say "Oi vavoy." I don't know if anybody else here grew up with something equivalent to "Oi oi oi."
Spanish,
In
we said that.
Spanish, in
Mhm.
Spanish, you say
do
ay,
they say
ay,
that
ay.
too? You say the same.
Ay, ay.
So you said ay ay ay, and we said oi oi oi. So okay,
Diane, I'm a little confused. I'm a little lost. What were you talking? Which word?
well, under the reading rule in the middle of 55, if you have the O and you add an E vowel at the end with the yud usually kind of is a hint about an E sound, not always. Then O plus E is oi,
Oh.
oi, oi. And they just give an example here. Oi, oi vavoy, which means like, oh gosh, oh my goodness, something like that. But there's also another very famous but mistranslated word, which is the word goy, goy, and or people with Ashkenazic accents say goy, goy. They'll kind of squish the vowel. That is sometimes interpreted in a derogatory sense, but all it really means is nation. It just means a nation. Goy means a nation or a people, right? A population. But when Jews used that term historically, it was like another nation, any other nation, right? Or any other group of people was a goy, and Israel was haaretz, the land, and the people of Israel were the people. So Israelites definitely had a sense of particularism, right? But it is not always used in a derogatory sense. And if you read the prayers and you read the Psalms, you'll see that sometimes it just means the nations of the world, right? All the nations of the world, for example, will come to serve you, God. So it doesn't always mean something negative when it's used. And that word goy is a very, very common word. And maybe some of you have heard the song Lo Yisa Goy El Goy Cheref, which is nations shouldn't war against nations. Lo Yisa Goy El Goy Cheref. Nations should not war against nations. Right, that's I think from the Psalms. Okay, 55 at the bottom of the page. All right, divide the class. Well, let's not have teams. Okay, I see what we're doing here. These are all verbs, like some very, very, very common Hebrew verbs. So I'll just read each of them and you can read it after me. Likro. At
Ikra.
page 55, bottom of the page. Likro.
Likro.
Lichtov.
Lichtov.
Lehorit.
Lehorit. No, read.
La'atzur.
So
Lehotzi.
Lehotzi.
Lehosi.
Lirkod. Lishmoa.
Say it again, please.
Lishmoa.
Lishmo.
Limso.
Limso.
Leharim. Lehishtachavot.
Lehishtahabot.
Wow.
Yes, those are mouthfuls, right?
Mhm.
Should we do it again? Let's do it again. If these are definitely words worth learning.
Mhm.
I'm not going to ask you to, but they're worth learning. Likro.
Likra.
Lichtov.
Lichtov.
Lehorid.
Lehorid.
La'atzur.
La'atzor.
Lehotzi.
Lehotzi.
Lirkod.
Lirkod.
Lishmoa.
Lishmoa.
Limtso.
Limso.
Leharim.
Habrim.
Lehishtachavot.
Lehishtahabot.
Now, if I were to read the English, would you be able to read the Hebrew, or do we need to practice reading them a couple more times? We read them maybe twice more. Likro.
Likro.
Tov. Lehorid.
Leho.
La'atzur.
So.
Lehotzi.
Lehotzi.
Lirkod.
Lirkod.
Lishmoa.
Lishmoa.
Limtso.
Limso.
Leharim.
Leharim.
Lehishtachavot.
Lehishtahabot.
Good. And
One word, or is that a phrase?
that's a word. That's a word. You know the prayer Elena where we go va'anach, maybe you don't. Va'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim.
Okay.
So which is umishtachavim is a form of this verb.
Ah.
Umishtachavim. It basically says, and we bend our knees, and we bow, and we thank you. That's basically. Okay. One more time. Likro,
Likro.
liktov,
Liktov.
lehorid,
Lehorit.
la'atzur,
Atzur.
lehotzi,
Lehotzi.
lirkod,
Lirkod.
lishmoa,
Lishmor.
limtso,
Limso.
leharim,
Leharim.
lehishtachavot.
Lehitachabot.
You know, we can't complain about Hebrew because look at some of the words that we find in German, right? German has some insanely long words. So Hebrew's not nearly as bad. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to read the English and you read the Hebrew, okay? To read,
Likro.
La.
write,
Listov.
to lower.
Leharit.
Lehovrid.
Good. To stop.
La Atzor.
To take out.
Lehotzi.
To dance.
Likrod.
Lerikrod.
Code, lear code.
Lirkod.
To hear.
Lishmoa.
Good.
Lishmoa.
To find.
Limso.
Limso.
Good. To raise.
Leharim.
To bow down.
Lehistacharot.
Very good. Lehishtachavot. Very good. Okay, let's really quickly take a look at the next page. Okay, now we're getting our other T consonant, right? We already have tav, and now we're doing tet, right? We already have tav, and now we're doing tet. So, looking at the letter tet, are there any letters that you think you might confuse with a tet? What was that? Okay, I didn't hear you, but that's okay. I think my speaker is not as good as it should be. I think the tet could be confused with, maybe you said this, I don't know. It could be confused with, let's see, sadi, or it could be confused with a mem, or even with an ayin.
What a samish.
Oh, if we had some, I don't see samech here, but it could be confused with samech, right? It could be confused with a samech. So there's several other letters, but it is shaped kind of like an upside down mem, or it's shaped like a samech with an opening at the top, right? Those are two letters that it kind of looks like the tet. Okay. So let's just read as much as we can of page 56. I'm on line 1. I'll read it twice and then you'll echo me the third time. Ta, te, ti, to, ti, tet. Ta, te, ti,
Ta.
ti, tet. Now echo me this time. Ta,
Ta.
Ta.
e,
Te.
Ti.
T,
I.
To.
to,
Ti.
T,
Tet.
tet.
Victor, I like your picture, your avatar picture. It's very nice.
Thanks.
Festive, right? Festive. Okay. Line 2. To mo. Ta ma. Te me. Okay, I'll read it one more time. To mo. Ta ma. Te me. Now echo. To
To.
mo.
Ma.
Ta
Ta.
ma.
Ma.
E.
Te.
Me.
Me.
Te.
Good. Okay. Unfortunately, this is all I have time for, but we made some progress, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So next time, I guess I'll start with the top of page 57, and I'm putting my Post-it note in the right place this time, right there, top of 57, and that's where we'll start next week.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Well done,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
You are such
Bye-bye.
good
Bye.
and dedicated students.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.